Welcome back to some more God hockey. If you've been paying attention to the Philadelphia Flyers this season, you'll notice they've just completed the second 10-game winless streak of the season. Not much has gone right in Philadelphia this year, and I'm not sure if there's a way really to salvage the season. So the question on everybody's mind is, what are you waiting for? This is the perfect situation to blow everything up, start fresh, and start building towards the future. So where do we start? Now, you can't just trade everybody off the team. You definitely want to have some players still around. And I think the Flyers definitely have more than a few guys that certainly you would like to keep. The first step is probably to identify the players you do want to keep. And then you're going to look at the ages of those players and probably trade anyone who's above that. The key players on the Flyers right now that you're going to look to be keeping are the guys like Farabee, Frost, Konechny, Provorov, Sanheim, and of course, goaltender Carter Hart. So let's just say around 25 is probably the age where we want to cut things off and start moving players out. Moving off of players isn't always easy, of course. There are some players who either make too much or are signed for too long. Those are some of the guys you may end up keeping for another year or two until you can find the right situation to move them. Let's look at a few guys that fall into that category. With another year remaining at $7 million, James Van Riemsdyk would be a fairly tough player to move. He can still put the puck in the net, but nowhere near the 36 goals he put up for the Toronto Maple Leafs in the year prior to the Flyers signing him to a long-term big money deal. This is a player who may actually be a better candidate for a buyout. You just want to give the player the ability to go somewhere else. You want to eliminate a few of those extra cap dollars. I think he'd end up being a cap hit of around 3.5 million next year and then 1.5 million the year after. It really wouldn't hurt the team if a rebuild is what they're going after. So again, that just might be the best move to make with that player. Ryan Ellis is a player who joined the Flyers this year as part of the Nolan Patrick trade. Ellis has only played in 4 games this season, and injury has kept him out of the lineup since. Ellis might be a player who you'd actually like to keep. He's on a long-term deal, so it would probably be difficult to move anyway. I think that's really the biggest barrier. It's an over $6 million a year deal as well, so you'd really have to find the right trading partner to fit that in for another team. Kevin Hayes and Cam Atkinson are both older players who are making good money on longer term deals. So they're probably also not guys who you'd realistically be able to find a good trading partner for at this point. All right, so let's take a look at a few players that the Flyers actually can trade. Derek Brassard is a player who seems to be on a never-ending string of one-year contracts. He's still a fairly useful player, mostly bottom 6, but he can chip in with some offense. So there might be a team out there who would want to add him for depth. I don't know that you'd really expect to get much for him, but certainly if you can, that'd be a smart move to make. Justin Braun is another veteran, older player at 34. He's only making 1.8 million. So for a team who's looking for a right shot defenseman with some decent size, might want to take a risk on him. Kind of like Brassard, you're not really going to get much back for him, but again, why lose him for nothing as a UFA next year? Scott Laughton, who the Flyers took in the first round all the way back in 2012. He still has 4 years left at $3 million per. So it's a bit of a longer term deal, but the dollars aren't terrible. He's a guy who can play in the middle of your lineup. He can be useful. He still chips in that 10 to 15 goal area. And I could see a number of teams who might want to have that type of a player into their lineup. Ivan Provorov was one of the guys on the list of players to keep, but I think if a team was wanting to come in with a good offer for him, I think I might be willing to do something there. This is a guy who has shown the ability to be a top pairing defenseman in the past, and in the right situation, I'm sure he could probably do that again now and in the future. He makes a lot, $6.75 million for 3 more years, but there's probably a deal to be made somewhere if the Flyers want to explore it. Even if the return you get is not what you would maybe expect, freeing up some of that long-term cap space might help you make a deal in the future. Maybe the deal to be made is find a team who's looking to offload a contract, maybe a 1-year deal for some similar money, You take that player off their hands, trade them a very useful Provorov, and take back some young players, a prospect or a couple of picks in the process. You burn that shorter term deal, you roll the dice on a couple of picks, and you use the cap space going forward. Sean Couturier is a player who's about to make big dollars on a long-term deal. Over the next 8 seasons, the Flyers are going to pay him $7.75 million per. This would be a really tough trade to make. On the one hand, the amount of time on that deal and the amount of dollars in that deal would make it really difficult for most teams to be able to handle. And on top of that, this is a guy who's been around quite a while. He's one of the top players in the team of recent memory. And with Giroux likely leaving, there's a good chance Couturier may even be in the running for the next captain. Now, that being said, if the Flyers are committed to a full rebuild, there's no sense in keeping a player like Couturier around when you probably could find a trade partner for him and get back what would probably be a large number of assets. Similar to what I mentioned with Provorov, if you found a team who has a player on a 1 or 2 year deal that's making around that much money that they need to get rid of, you can do that for them, give them a great player like Couturier in return, and then you can take back a bunch of picks or prospects, good young players, whatever it happens to be, pieces that are going to help you move forward in the rebuild. Now for the obvious targets. Rasmus Ristolainen, I think he was the right player at the wrong time for this team. In a season where nothing is going right, it's easy to look at a new guy, get out your blame gun, and just start blasting. This is a useful player. He's a pending UFA, and I'm sure there are any number of teams that would be willing to take him on. This is one where the Flyers would probably do a little bit of cap retention to fit him into a few extra teams to maybe even drive the price up or just get the trade partner with the pieces that they really would want. And again, this is a good player who can log some decent mid-pairing minutes, 5-on-5 and killing penalties. Okay, and on to the big fish, Claude Giroux. He's the name that everybody's talking about. Giroux is still a great player. He's able to put up numbers on a bad team at this later stage of his career. He's the player that the Flyers should be looking to move most, and probably the player who brings you back the best return. Now, since most of the top teams in the league are pretty close to the cap, I'd say the Flyers are probably going to wait much closer to the trade deadline to make this move. It'll lower the number of dollars that the team trading for Giroux is going to have to take on. When you're looking at most of the top teams and how close they all are to the cap, those are the teams that are going to be looking to acquire a player like Giroux. It's probably a good idea if Philly waits a little bit longer, get him right up to the trade deadline before moving him. This will lower the dollars that the team trading for Giroux will have to take onto their own cap. But any team who's looking for, let's say, a second line center, a guy who's going to produce some numbers, veteran presence, strong leader, someone who's been in all situations, this is a player that many, many teams could use. It's going to be really tough to see a longtime Flyer and a guy who's really meant a lot to the organization like Giroux move in this way. But with the stage in his career he's currently at and the trajectory of the team, it makes a lot of sense that the team and the player will part ways now. Giroux's going to be a UFA at the end of the season, and if the Flyers don't move him now, they're probably going to lose him for nothing. Okay, so now that we know who should be traded, where do we think those players should be traded to? I think the first team that comes to mind with Giroux would be the Calgary Flames. I'm not exactly sure how they'd make this work with the cap or which contracts may have to come and go to make the deal happen. But when you look at what they need as a team and what he brings as a player, I think that's a perfect fit. Another option I see would be the Anaheim Ducks. They've managed to get themselves into playoff contention, and they have a great young team that looks like they're ready to really do something great. What I'm not really sure of is whether or not the team would agree that this is the time to make what would be seen as a bit of an all-in move where they'd be giving up some assets, acquiring a veteran player who's likely to leave at the end of the season. I'm not sure really that would fit in with how Anaheim sees their organization moving forward. Ristolainen could go to any number of teams. I think of teams like the Edmonton Oilers or Toronto Maple Leafs, even the Boston Bruins. And for the Flyers, if they were willing to take back a contract like a Nick Ritchie or a Nick Foligno, they may be able to even sweeten the return. I do wonder if a team like the Ottawa Senators might be interested in acquiring a player like Sean Couturier. When you look at Ottawa, they have a ton of cap space right now. They've also got the majority of their good young players signed to long-term deals, so they do have that flexibility. It seems as though most of the young players are really ready to take the next step. Ottawa sits right on the border of Quebec and is a bilingual city. So to have a New Brunswick-raised French-Canadian player on the team would probably be seen as an asset as well. It would be a big ask. I don't really know what would have to go back the other way, but certainly that's the type of team you'd be looking for if you wanted to move a player like Couturier with the contract that he has starting next season. I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen with the Flyers over the next couple of weeks, but they're definitely going to be one of the more interesting teams to watch up until the trade deadline. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Who do you think the Flyers are going to or should be looking at moving? Where do you think those players are going to get moved to, and what are you hoping to see in return? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.